So on this video, I'll be talking about responsibility accounting, segment evaluation, and transfer pricing. So let's start with our objectives. First is to understand the importance of organizational structure to managerial reporting. Next is differentiate centralization from decentralization, distinguish authority, responsibility, and accountability. Identify the different types of responsibility centers, explain the concept of controllability in relation to responsibility accounting, apply various measurements in evaluating segment performance, prepare a segment performance report, understand the different bases of transfer pricing, and lastly, analyze the effects of transfer pricing to segment performance and overall enterprise performance. Now, the last two objectives will be discussed in the next video, while the others will be discussed in this video. So let's start with the organizational structure. So it is very important for an organization to identify its organizational structure because it serves as a basis on the quality of decisions made by an organization. So there are two different types, which is centralized or centralization and decentralized or decentralization. So these two organizational structures differ again in the quality of decisions made. So first we have decentralized or decentralization organizational structure. In centralized structure, there is only one person, here the red circle, that does all the decision making for the organization. So for example, this is a certain department, this is another unit, this is another segment, or kana siya basta lahi-lahi or mga personnel. All the decisions made are done by the person nga kaning naa sa center or the head of the organization. So for instance, the CEO or the president of the company. So again, only one person does the decision making and centralization. So kada naa gani mga events or activities that involves decision making, so kana siya tanan is ato na siya i-address, or the one who has authority to decide on those events is ang kana na or kanirang head sa imuhang organization. Now, on the other hand, we have the decentralized na organizational system. So in the centralized organization system, as you can see, what is different here is there is already a delegation of authority. So unlike sa centralized na diba isa ra ka person ang mobuhat sa imuhang decision making, in decentralization is naagyapon kay head sa imong organization. However, as you can see here, na kay murag mga sub-heads, diba? Or mga managers na who are given the authority to decide for their own unit or for their own department. So for instance, kani si employee is ay pa siya mo-report first ni manager, diba? And then si manager has the authority to decide on certain things about the unit before nga if ever na gani mga concerns nga dili na scope ni manager, diha pa siya maabot ni organizational head. So mo na sa imong decentralized. Now these organizational structures have their own advantages and disadvantages. Now, for a centralized organizational structure, it is best used if you are only dealing with a small organization or gamay ra ang tao nga gi-manage or gamay ra ang mga personals sa organization kay tungod dili kayo lisod nga diba dili kayo lisod nga mo direct ka sa imuhang owner. So kasgaran ka ng mga sole proprietorships, diba, is centralized na ilang organizational structure. However, if your organization is a multinational organization or multinational company or maski international company or dako na jud kayo ang buhang organization, it is best if ang iyahang organizational structure is decentralization. Okay? Tungod dako naman kayong organization, so you have to delegate your authority to the mga managers or to other people kay dili naman madala nga isa ra ka person ang magbuhat sa tanang decisions, especially tungod kay volume of transactions ba yan ang naa sa usa ka dako na organization. So mo na naanay delegation na mahitabo. Next, we have the authority, responsibility, accountability, and controllability. So I've mentioned this in the previous slide about centralization and decentralization. No, so when we say authority, it refers to the power to give orders or to give commands or to give instructions or to make decisions. So if we go back to the organizational structure, in a centralized organizational structure, the authority is given to one person or the head of the organization. However, in a decentralized organizational structure, the authority is delegated to other people. So, naano yung mga managers na napod sila yung mga authorities. So, next we have the responsibility. Now, responsibility is the duty to do or not to do an activity, to perform and produce results. So, tanang tao sa usa ka organization has his or her own na responsibilities. May you be the head, a manager, or the staff. So, na kay kanya-kanyang responsibilities, diba? It would depend on your job description per se. So, that is what you refer to as the responsibility. Now, the responsibility of an individual will, of course, vary kay tungod lahi-lahi man og position or level ang kada individual in our organization. So for instance, a staff level has, let's say, minimal responsibility or lesser responsibility in regards to or in comparison to a manager. Kay tungod si manager daghan, like si staff is specific ra sa iyahang task. Like for example, si accounts payable na clerk, diba? Iyang responsibility is mainly on the accounts payable na mga task. However, kung wanita ni finance manager, si finance manager is iyang responsibility is including or mo include na sa mga other subunits, diba? So aside from the accounts payable, under sa ni finance si accounts receivable, under niya si general ledger. So ang iyang responsibility of managing or supervising those subunits is mas greater na. So ina na siya. Now, accountability is the answerability on the consequences of what has been done or not done. So, kung unsa gani imong responsibility, meaning dapat accountable pud ka sa kung unsa man gani ang mahitabo sa imong mga gipangbuhat or sa imong responsibilities. Now, authority and responsibility must go together because authority without responsibility is absolute power, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. So again, authority and responsibility must go together. Kay if authority ra daw ang naa pero dili respond or wala kay responsibility, like you are only giving orders but you are not doing anything, so naara nimo is absolute power. However, if balihon pud nato, you only have responsibility without the authority, that is what you call blind obedience. So magsunod dasad ka kung kinsa tuang naghatag og power, di ba? You are just doing things blindly or just plain servitude. So in an organization, dapat equal na ang imuhang authority or responsibility, or they should go together. Once na kay authority, napod kay responsibility. Now, si accountability is, as I mentioned ganiha, di ba? Accountability is go together po siya with responsibility because, again, you should be accountable of what you have done. So meaning makonect na nato si authority, responsibility, and accountability. So lastly, we have controllability. So when we say controllability, it is the power of the manager to decide or influence the incurrence or non-incurrence of an item. So the controllability has something to do with authority as well. Ang sa controllability lang is more on asa ang span sa imuhang authority. Asa ra kutob ang imuhang authority or imuhang makontrol. So mo na ang deal sa imuhang controllability, or that is what controllability is about, which later on is ato niya na siyang i-relate sa ato ang mga responsibility centers. So here we have our responsibility centers. So ang naari responsibility centers kay ang ato arang decentralized na organizational structure. Again, why? Because sa decentralized is na delegate naman atong authority. So dili ra man isa ka person ang mo make og decision. So mo na natin mga gitawag nga responsibility centers. So these include units, divisions, departments, or segments in an organization. So mo na sa atong refer to as our responsibility centers. Now, each center is also headed by a responsible officer. So, pwede manager, pwede vice president for a certain department, diba? So, it depends kung unsa ang mga positions nga nasa company. So, muna sa headed na sila by a responsible officer. Now, there are 4 major classifications of responsibility centers. We have the cost centers, revenue centers, profit centers, and investment centers. Now, for cost centers, of course, ang cost centers, ang iyahang control or the control of the responsible officer sa cost center is in relation rapod sa mga aspects or mga events na happen sa iyahang certain center. So, mo na siya ang that is how the concept of controllability applies in responsibility or applies with the responsibility centers. So, you only have control over your own centers. So, mo na siya ang sa controllability. Same with our revenue centers. So, again, you only have control over your mga revenue centers. So, sa cost center, may pasabutan ng mga cost centers. So, cost centers are those centers nga has control or influence over the incurrence of cost in an organization. So, meaning sila ang mga departments na maka-incur og cost ang organization, and nasa control over those costs. So, for instance, atong production department, di ba? So, production department, maka-incur matag cost in relation to our materials, their labor, di ba? And our production head is responsible or has control over those na mga factors. So, muna siya, ang cost center has control or influence over the incurrence or non-incurrence of costs in an organization. While si revenue centers is na siya control over the generation of revenue in an organization. So, for instance, kana sales department, di ba? So, kana sila control over the revenue. Now, when we say profit centers, is kani siya is center siya nga na siya control over both the revenue and the cost centers. So, kani siya, meaning si profit center is kana siya nga department or kana siya nga segment is incurring cost and maka-generate po siya og income. So, kani man siya is, kaning mga centers manggod is differ man sad ni kung giun sa pag-structure ni organization ang iyang company. Like, for instance, if ang iyang pag-structure sa iyang organization is by product or by product line, of course, ang kada product line is automatic siya nga profit center siya kay di ba kada product has their own revenue ug na po siya cost. But if ang iyang pag-structure sa iyang organization is through function per se, so maka-identify ka nga unsa nga departments ang incurring ra gyud og cost alone, unsa nga departments ang incurring og expenses alone. So ana siya. But in reality is wala man siguro yung department nga mag-incur rag revenue alone without expenses. Kaya di ba? Balik ta sa itong matching principle. Maka-incur pa ba ka og expense before ka maka-generate og income. So, kaning revenue center is mostly meron siya theoretical kid nga mainly revenue ra ang ma-generate sa usa ka business. Di ba? Kay for example, sa sales na to ang sales is mag-generate siya income pero unsa man yung mga expenses sa imong sales, di ba? Naa sa biya kay like ang imong mga salaries sa kanang mga personnel nga naa nga center, di ba? Those are expenses. So kana siya. So mainly is kasagaran is profit centers good ang mga departments or segments. Now lastly, we have the investment centers, wherein these are the centers who have control over the investment opportunities that the company should take. So, investment centers is again, they have the control over what the company would be doing in the future or asa nila i-allocate ang ilang mga assets for investments. Like for example, makonsider na to nga investment centers is kana na sa ato ang mga heads, di ba? Or kanang sa mga VP's office or president's office. Those are investment centers kana ato mga president's office, di ba? Mga vice president's office kay sila man ang mga centers that decide on the investment of the organization or sila man ang mo decide kung as I allocate ang mga resources sa organization. Now, aside from that, investment centers makonsidered po natin investment centers or kana ato ang mga R&D or research and development, di ba? Those can also be considered as investment centers. Now, let's have an example. So kani siya hopefully maklaro ang words, pero this is an example of an organizational chart, diba? So you have the shareholder, the board, legal department, the director, and then you have the following na mga departments. So you have the production, investment department, marketing department, technical department, and human resources na department. So kung anita sa production department, napagid siya mga sub-departments, no? So you have the production planning, technical, production itself, the quality assurance, and the maintenance. So, si organization is dapat ma-identify niya or depende niya kung unsa ang iyahang classification sa mga responsibility centers. So, pwede nga ang iyang pag-classify is kaning as a whole tanan, this is considered as one responsibility center. Or, pwede nga binagsa kada segment or kaning production planning is considered as one center. Kaning technical and industrial design is considered another center. Kaning production is considered as another center. So again, it would depend on the company kung saan niya pag-classify ang iyahang mga responsibility centers. For example, sa kaning investment department, kung ganahan siya as a whole is classified as an investment center, or pag sa ang tinagsaon ba niya, lahi iba ang research, lahi ang planning, lahi ang engineering. So it would depend. Same here with the marketing department. So, inana siya. This is, muna siya kung gimension nga per function ang ilahang organizational structure, no? So, again, the identification of responsibility centers, either cost center na siya, revenue center, profit center, or investment center, would depend on the organization. Now, next, we have here another example wherein nadiri is by product siya. So, you have here the main departments, of course, chairman, then CEO, then you have the finance, operations, and sales. Now, as you can see here, ang sa finance is naka-divide siya onto the product, which is Shenzhen and Kanzu. So, kana siya. So, si kada, kung ari po ta sa operation is makita nato nga si kada product is nalahi siya. So, again, ang identification sa imong responsibility centers is pwede by product line, diba? Or by function. So, kani siya is by product line. So, sa operations, si Shenzhen is na siya lahing iyang own quality, engineering, production, and others. So, pwede kani siya is considered as another cost center. Sa kani sa Gansu is napagid siya mga sub ng mga units, no? So, regular multi-layer and HDI. So, another center ba na siya? Or kaning FPC is considered another center. So, again, it would depend on the organization. What is important lang is ma-identify gyud sa organization which are their cost centers, unsay revenue centers, profit centers, and their investment centers. It is important for them to identify the kinds of centers na ang naa ang ilang organization because the evaluation of those centers would also vary. So, speaking of evaluation, so anina ta sa performance evaluation. So, a manager's performance should be measured or evaluated in line with the established objectives of his centers. So, meaning, the different responsibility centers should be evaluated according po sa kung unsa ang ilahang authority, responsibility, accountability. So, muna ang basis of your evaluation. So, dili pwede nga for instance, si production manager is i-evaluate nimo siya sa trabaho ni marketing manager, di ba? Dili pwede ingon ana because it is outside his scope of work na or dili na niya authority ang mga nagipangbuhat sa marketing na department, di ba? So, meaning si production is imo siyang i-evaluate based rapod sa performance niya or based rapod sa authority and responsibility nga gihatag sa iya ha. So, unsa ra siya accountable for, mao ra pod na ang imuhang i-measure sa iya ha or ana ra pod ka mag-evaluate sa iyahang performance. So, meaning si production imo na siyang evaluate based on the results nga gibuhat sa production department. Si marketing manager, imo na siyang evaluate based on the results nga gibuhat sa marketing department. So, ingon ana siya. Now, performance evaluation is considered or is a matter of control. So, control siya tungod kay mailhan nimo if the certain department is really performing well or not, di ba? If that certain center, responsibility center, is doing its part in achieving the goals and objectives of the organization. So, in responsibility accounting, ma-determine nimo, di ba, if a certain department is really doing its task through reports. So, meaning na kay mga responsibility accounting reports which could serve as your performance reports and will be the basis for your evaluation. So, we have here or in here is a different na mga responsibility centers and the evaluation techniques that can be applied in each center. Now, first, we have here the cost center, which ato ang evaluation technique is our cost variance analysis. So, when we say variance analysis, basically, kanilang siya is imuha lang gi-compare ang actual versus sa imuhang budgeted. Now, whatever the variance or the difference is, kana na nimo siya makita. So, for example, ang gi-allot ra nimo nga budget for cost center 1 is only 100,000, then sa cost center 2 is 200,000, then the actual is si cost center 1 is incur siya 150, while si cost center 2 is 180. So, makita na nimo nga through the variance or the difference in the actual and the budgeted, makita na nimo or you can at first glance say na cost center 2 is performing well kasi tungod wala man siya mulapas sa budgeted. So inana siya ba imo lang i-compare ang actual ug ang imuhang budgeted. Mo na mahitabo sa imuhang variance analysis. Same would happen for your revenue centers. So sa revenue centers, ang imuha na lang pong gi-compare ani is ang actual sales ug ang budgeted sales inana. So ngato gyapon mga factors sa imuhang revenue na department. So, ano na siya? Mo na siya ang sa imuhang revenue variance analysis. So, again, for example, if makita nimo nga a certain department is performing well, di ba? So, mas makainganyo siya sa imuhang mga or mas makamotivate siya sa staff to do well. Kaya for instance, number reward, if maka-achieve og quota, mga ina nga mga things ba. So, di ba, unsa man yung paghibaw nga naka-achieve na siya og quota through revenue variance analysis. So, makita nimo nga na-achieve na niya ang inyong set na quota, napalabuan pag yun. So, di ba, pwede na siya as basis baron for additional rewards and compensations sa usa ka employee or sa ka-department. So, mo na siya yung form of evaluation sa imuhang revenue center. Now, as to the profit center, is kani siya is slightly different na siya. Because again, sa imuhang profit center is na kay revenue nga side ug naa po kay cost na side. So, mo na siya gamitan natong segment margin analysis, which we will discuss in detail later on. Now, for the investment centers, is na po tayo daghan. We have the ROI, we have the residual income model, the economic value added, and other models, which we also discussed in detail in the next slides. So, anhita sa profit center na manager's performance. Katong segment margin analysis. So again, as I mentioned, a profit center has a control over the revenues or costs. So his performance or the performance of the profit center na manager is evaluated based on controllable margin, while the center's performance is evaluated based on segment margin. So again, atay duha, controllable o segment. If ang imuhang gi-evaluate is ang manager, ang managerial performance, or ang person nga assigned sa imuhang profit center, ang imuhang tan-awon is ang controllable margin. Nganong controllable margin man? Naaman diri ang imuhang controllable nga fixed cost. So meaning si manager is naa siya'y authority or naa siya controllability over the direct fixed cost. So, meaning na siya yung mga mabuhat na mga task nga to minimize baron the fixed cost kasi since makontrol man nimo siya. So, meaning kung ma-minimize niya ang fixed cost or ang controllable direct fixed cost, makaingon ka nga kana siya na manager is well performing. Diba? So, mo ani ka diri mo base sa imong controllable margin. On the other hand, if you are looking for the performance if you are evaluating for the performance of the center as a whole, so kanang whole na gyud nga profit center dili ra sa manager, dili ang manager performance but the center as a whole, ang imong tan-aw na is ang segment margin. So i-apply lang nimo ang katong non-controllable na direct fixed cost. So siya. Now kaniya contribution margin, maingon niya mo, Miss, asa ang part ana sa imuhang sales? Kung ani ra na siya ni-reflect sa imuhang contribution margin, ang katong sa imuhang sales. Diba? How do you get your contribution margin? It is your sales less your variable cost. So, ano na siya? Dili na siya na-reflect na ang sa imuhang contribution margin. So, wala na nato gihatagan og emphasis diri. Ang gihatagan nato og emphasis is kanilang difference between your controllable margin and your segment na margin. So, let's have an example. So, we have here an example na you are given a sales of 6,300,000, variable cost of 3,474, contribution margin of 2,826, we have fixed cost of 2,906. So we have a net income or net loss of 80,000. Now, kana siya is mara siya ang makita sa imuhang income statement. No, however, the company operates 3 product lines which has the following related data. So, kani daw ang data sa imuhang organization. So, nakay tulo kani siya is kung mo siya ang makita as a whole, kani siya. Now, ang imuha is ang sa imuhang what do you call this? Specific na nga mga product line. So, kani product 1, 2, and 3. So, makita na ni mo diri ang kanang allocation sa kada product. So, for example, sa product 1, ang iyang sales ra out of the 6, 3 kay 1, 2, and so on and so forth. So, it's na diri So, we have here, diba, naka-identify na pod kung pila ang controllable o not controllable sa each na mga department or each na mga product lines. So, if you are asked on which product is performing well or not, so ari na siya makita sa ato ang profit or loss. So, mo to imuha ng kaon ang profit or loss sa kada department. So, for instance, diba dinhi, product 1, we have a so again, for instance, product 1, we have here, ang iyang profit or loss is at 14,000. Pero makita ang pula to there, diba? At ang iyang segment margin is at 88. Then for product 2 is at 238. For product 3 is at negative 520. So, given this information lang, diba, makaingon ka or you can say first glance na since product C or no, product 3 rather has a negative na segment margin. So, makaingon ka nga that product line is not performing well kay negative man ang iyang segment margin. So, it's either mo na dayon ay basis for the organization if they would continue, diba? If they would still continue producing the third product or they would ilan na siyang i-terminate or ilan lang i-stop ang production for the third product because in the end wala man po na-earn ang imuhang or it is not a earning na product. Now, in terms of looking into the performance of the managerial performance, diba, atong tanawon is the controllable na margin. So, arita mo tanaw as to the performance of the managers. So, even if, diba, as you can see, even if si product 3 is loss siya, pero dili ka pwede maingon na, di ka diretso na moingon nga sala man gud ni manager sa product 3 kay tungod inani ingon ana di ba? Pero as you can see here sa controllable margin is positive baya gihapon ang iyang controllable na margin, di ba? So meaning is si manager na assign na product is iya gyapon gitry iyang best to perform well kay naka-earn man gyapon siya og positive na controllable margin. So, if imuha gani siyang i-compare, if imuhang kwaon ang imuhang ratio, di ba, or iyang rate, kung pila ang rate niya sa controllable margin in relation to your sales, makita nimo nga itong controllable margin divided by sales. So, meaning, pila ang percentage of sales ba nga nakuha ni specific nga manager. Oops. Yeah. Ito ba? So as you can see there, si imuhang product 1 is 26% ang iyang controllable margin sa imuhang sales, while si product 2 is 16%, while si product 3 is only 9%. So kana siya makuan gyapon nimo na the manager tried to do his best, di ba, to have a positive, pero ang overall impact yapon niya is negative tungod na ani sa imong non-controllable na mga fixed cost o imong allocated na fixed cost. Now, asa man siya pwede mo mubawi ari siya bawi niya sa kaning halita siya makabawi sa ihang controllable na direct fixed cost kasi it's man ang naa siya power upon. So, kana siya. So that is how you evaluate the or a profit center. So again, if ang gi-evaluate gani nimo is the performance of the center as a whole, ang imong tan-awon is kaning imong segment margin. If you are evaluating the performance of the manager or managerial performance, ang imong tan-awon is kaning imong controllable margin. So, ang imong hinumduman gyud is kaning imong proforma na entry. So, kana lang siya. Next, let's move on to the different investment center na evaluation techniques. So again, the investment center has authority to decide over which investment opportunity should be considered. So as such, their performance is evaluated based on the results of the decisions on the investment. So dairy, the cost-benefit criteria already plays a vital role in the selection of the or in the investment selection na decision process. So, there are various na evaluation techniques. We have the ROI, or pwede na siya makuha using the dew point. We have the residual income na model, and then we have the economic value added. So, mag-start sa ato ang ROI. So, ROI or often or also referred to as return on asset, so ROA, or accounting rate of return. So those terms can be interchanged or interchangeable siya. So just be cautious. So ROI is your segment profit divided by your segment investment. Now don't be confused with segment margin ha. Segment margin is different from segment profit. So, kato atong example ganiha, ang katong profit or loss, mao to ang segment na profit or loss nimo. Meaning sa segment siya ba, or that certain center or that certain product ba or cost center na siya nga. Or sa certain segment na profit na siya. So, dili na siya ang segment margin ha. Ang profit na siya, it's your profit divided by your investment. So, if you look at this equation, you will notice that the ROI is a measure of benefit over cost analysis. Benefit is your profit represented by your segment profit, while the cost is represented by your investment. So, pila daw ang na-earn mo na profit given nga mauna, or pila ang imong nakuha nga benefit or segment profit given na mauna ang imong investment, diba? So sa imong gi-invest, kani siya nga formula is diba makaingon ka nga pila ang percentage sa imong profit nga nakuha given nga na kay cost nga na-incur or kaning investment ang imong na incur. So meaning if you want to increase your ROI DI, again, if you want to increase your ROI based kanina formula, it's either you increase your profit. So, kaniya side ang imuhang i-increase or imuhang i-decrease ang imuhang investment. So, muna siya ang saan pag-increase sa imuhang ROI. Kasi diba, your increase in profit would result to an increase in your ROI. So, meaning direct ilahang relationship. Now, a decrease in your investment would result to an increase in your ROI. So, meaning indirect ang ilahang relationship. So, muna siya ang imuhang ROI. Now, another way of getting your ROI is using the DuPont model. Sa DuPont model, is kanina lang siya, is naa na relation sa imuhang sales, di ba? So, if ang profit nimo is directly given, so you can make use of your sales. Or if na available information as to your sales, kay mo ni siya ang imuhang gamiton. So, your ROI is your profit divided by your net sales, which is also known as your return on sales, multiplied by your net sales over your investment, which is known as your asset turnover. So again, kaning profit divided by your net sales is your return on sales, where your net sales divided by your investment is your asset turnover. So in here, the investment center or the investment center manager takes investment only those which are of relevance to their operations. So this will result to efficiency in allocating investment funds, and only those investments of which the investment center has control and use in operation shall be recorded in the ROI determination. So katulad investments na iyahang gihandle is mo na po to iyahang or may mag-determine sa iyahang ROI. So, kana siya. Let's have an example. Okay, so you have here an example. We have investment in operating assets of 5 million, net income of 1.1 million, and sales of 11 million. Now, if we are asked for our margin of sales is just another word for your return on sales. So again, margin of sales is just another word for your return on sales. So your return on sales or margin of sales is just your net income, diba, or your profit divided by your net sales. So kani sales. So we have a margin of 10%. So meaning 10% of your sales ang nahimong net income. So man ang margin of sales. Now your asset turnover is your net sales divided by your investment. Net sales divided by your investment. So that is 2.2. Now, your ROI, diba, you have two ways on getting your ROI. It's either magamit ka sa DuPont, which is your margin of sales multiplied by your asset turnover. So, you have 22% ang imong ROI. Or, gamit ka sa kaninga formula, your segment profit divided by your segment investment. See? Parehas kapon silag answer at 22%. Nga naman, diba, kung imuha man ni siyang i-plot good, ang mahitabo ra is kani imuhang net sales is makancel ra siya. Atong iingon ani ha. So, again, inala ka sayon kung unsaon pagkuha sa imuhang ROI. Now, let's move on to ROI and its limitations. So, the use of ROI has several limitations. which I'll be explaining to you given this example. So you have two companies, company A and B. Now you can see here the ROI of company A is at 20%. The ROI of company B is at 40%. You can also see the amount of investment in each company. So that is 1 billion and 1 million respectively. And the life of the assets in years. So you have 15 and 2 years. So at first glance, diba, if you use the ROI model, you may assume or imuhang conclusion is you can conclude at first glance that company B is performing well. Again, at first glance, you can see that company B is performing well according to the ROI because you can see here, company B's ROI is at 40%, while company A's ROI is only at 20%. So, if you will solely base on the ROI, we can conclude that company B is performing well. However, if you look at the other details, you can see that the amount of investment for company A and company B varies significantly. Company A is managing 1 billion worth of investment, while company B is only managing a 1 million worth of investment. So, makaingon ka nga si company A, it is harder to manage company A tungod kay mas dako iyang amount of investment. Therefore, company B is mas dali niya ma-manage ang iyang investment tungod kay mas gamay man siya in comparison to A. So, that can be one of the reasons nganong mas dako ang ROI ni company B tungod kay mas gamay man ang iyang investment, mas dali man niyang ma-allocate baron or mas dali niyang ma-utilize kay tungod gamay ra man ang iyang kailangan i-manage or iyang controllability is lesser or yung scope of work is lesser in comparison to company A. Now, another thing is the asset life also matters. So, in here, you can see company B is 2 years lang ang iyahang or the asset or the life of the asset is ma-recover lang siya in 2 years. And then, si company A is, ang life of the asset is ma-recover siya in 15 years. So, for example, if given na 2 years sa iyang life and then sa first year is 40% na ang na-return sa imong investment, in the next year is dapat bawion niya ang more or less 60%, diba? So, ina na siya. Dili ni mo mabawi ang imuhang return on investment given the life of the asset. Unlike si company A, nga ang life sa iyang asset is 15 years, diba? Now, nabawi na niya or na siya return nga 20% on the first year palandaan. Na 15 years ha. So, how much more pa on the mga following na years? So, with the life of the asset, makaingon ka nga company A is performing well than company B. Kay again, first year of operations pa lang, 20% na ang na-recover niya. And ang total life sa imuhang asset is 15 years. So, how much more sa mga, for example, ato lang iingon, for instance, nga 20% iyang ROI per year. So, 20% times 15 years kang maka-earn og ROI na 20%. So, di ba, mabawi jud ni company ang iyang investment. However, kung anita ni company B, ang life sa imuhang asset is only in 2 years, tapos sa first year is 40% pa lang ang imuhang na-recover. Yeah, you only have 1 year left. So, if ibutan na to 40% lang gihapon ang ma-earn mo for the next year, at the life of the asset, ang imuhang nakuha ratanan or imuhang total ROI is only 80%. So, wala man gani makuha ang full or wala man ganin mo ma-retrieve ang full amount of investment nimo. So, with that, makaingon ka nga, di ba, mas performing well si company A. Another thing is the special assignment matters, wherein the ROI model may not also be the most suitable method in evaluating the performance of an excellent manager who is assigned to make a turnaround performance, say to deliver a profitable performance of a previously unprofitable operation. So for instance, let's say nga kana siya nga company or kana siya nga product or segment is tabangunon kayo siya, no? Diba? Like, para sa to example gani ha, katon si product C, na tabangunon kayo siya, and then a manager is assigned to work on that na segment, diba? So, dili ka maka-judge dayon through IOI, kay tungod, kana siya nga company or kana siya nga segment is dili na siya performing well in the first place. So it would be a challenge kung unsaon na sa manager nga mapabali niya para mapahimong profitable ang usa ka segment, di ba? So kana siya ROI is not the only way, or dili ra ka solely mo base sa ROI in evaluating a certain segment or a managerial performance. Now, another method is the residual income na model. Now, because ROI uses absolute amount as basis of evaluating the acceptance of a prospective investment or in evaluating the performance of an investment project, na form part ni ang imuhang residual income. When you say residual income, it is your segment income less your minimum income, so that is your residual income. So the segment income here is expressed before tax. So again, yung segment income is expressed before tax, or so you can also refer to it as your EBIT, or earnings before income, earnings before interest and tax. Now, in here, the minimum income is sometimes labeled as imputed income, implied income, implicit income, or desired income. So, the investment base used in computing the minimum income is to be agreed upon by the corporate head and the investment center na manager. So, the imputed interest rate is to be determined by the corporate headquarter management, and normally the imputed interest rate is based on the prevailing market rate from which the business can generate income without accepting a high business risk. So the imputed rate is ordinarily the pre-tax cost of capital, and in principle should reflect the degree of risk of the reporting responsibility center. Now, if the residual income is positive, the performance is above standard and is therefore favorable. Now, if negative po siya is, of course, bali. Now, residual income is considered superior than the ROI because it is determined in absolute peso amount, not in rate. So again, si residual income nimo unsa ang difference diri is to take into consideration na ka sa imuhang minimum income. Si ROI is ni stop lang ka sa imuhang segment income. Mas ROI is stop lang ka to sa imuhang segment income or segment profit, diba? Na si residual income is na siya consideration sa imuhang minimum income. Now, ang competition or diri na mo vary ang competition sa imuhang minimum income because again, the minimum income is computed based on your imputed na rate. So again, it is the management who establishes this imputed rate based po sa ilahang mga nakita sa or based on outside factors like the degree of risk, kung unsay performance or unsay expected performance niya in the industry or in the market. So kana siya, ang imong minimum income is again mag-base siya sa imong imputed na rate. So with that, makuha na din mo ang imong residual income. So mara jud na ilahang main na difference ana na sa imong minimum na income. Next is your economic value added or EVA. So your economic value added is a more specific after tax version sa imong residual income. Diba? Hinumdumi, your residual income, ang iyang gigamit is your EBIT, income before interest and tax. Sa economic value added, there is you are making use of your operating profit after tax. So it represents the business unit's true economic profit because a change in the cost of equity capital is implicit in the cost of capital. So the cost of equity is an opportunity cost. That is the return that could have been obtained with the best alternative investment having similar risks. So EVA is computed as follows. You have your operating profit after tax less your minimum income, which in here your minimum income is already computed by your investment multiplied by your weighted average cost of capital. So there you have it, and then that is your economic value added. So again, how is it different from your residual income? First is your residual income made use of EBIT before interest and tax. Your your EVA makes use of your profit after tax. So meaning ang imuhang EBIT is imo pa siyang i-multiply by your tax rate. Diba? So, para makuha mo imuhang profit after tax or imo pa siyang didakan sa imuhang tax rate. Now, in getting also your minimum income, you have here the instead of computing it using the imputed rate which was used in your residual income, there is EVA is you use your weighted average cost of capital. So the weighted average cost of capital is na siya computation pero for discussion purpose or for during na chapter is dili lang kayo na siya i-highlight no kay naman na siya sa lahi na subject. Ang imong weighted average cost of capital, I think it's in financial management, so kana siya pero given na imong weighted average cost of capital, so mo na ang imong multiplyan sa imong investment niya para makuha imong minimum income. So again, dili na imong imputed rate, but rather your weighted average cost of capital ang imong i-multiply sa imong investment para makuha nimo ang imong minimum income. So diha sila nag-differ sa imong residual. So with that, you can already get your economic value added. And then the last method or last na ato ang evaluation model is our equity spread. So equity spread, just like the economic value added, is also a straightforward method for measuring managerial performance regarding creation of shareholder value. So it is makuha nimo imong equity spread by multiplying the shareholders beginning balance, diba, by the return on equity. Multiply na siya ha, multiply. So shareholder multiplied by the ROE. So makuha nimo yung equity spread. Now your return on equity is simply your net income divided by your average shareholders equity. So mo na ang imuhang ROE. So with that is makakuha ka sa imuhang equity spread. So kana lang siya.